Hey everyone, thank you for joining me. I'm a guy called Joe and this is Bootstrapping Tools. Today we're going to be doing a Let's Build Together guide to build a low-code retool application. Now before we do that, make sure to check out our YouTube channel for some of the other guides that we've done for Retool, where we've connected it to a Google Sheet and then connected that to SendGrid to send emails, and then connected that to Plotly.js to display our data in beautiful charts. We also have other videos where we teach you how to connect data sources such as MySQL and PostgreSQL, as well as Data Studio and other applications. But today we're going to be talking about Retool, and we're going to be connecting Retool to Airtable. If you haven't used Airtable before, it's a pretty powerful tool. They tout themselves as being, a database-like application, but with the UI of a spreadsheet. I've used it before at companies I work with. I've also used it for myself and my personal organization and app building. So I would highly recommend that you also check it out. Today we're going to be using one of the templates that they actually provide to you. It's called the product catalog, and here it's all a bunch of sample data already, and this is essentially what Airtable looks like. Looks very similar to a spreadsheet, so you're probably looking pretty familiar right now, pretty comfortable with it. But you do get lots of additional features on top of it, such as coloring for tags. You can link between different tables. You can have images in here. You can do ordering. You also have different views if you wanted to, sort the data in a slightly different way or group them up in a different way. And then, of course, like I said before, you have different tables or tabs that you can connect to the other data sets that you can also use to create relationships. But of course, it is still a spreadsheet. So as much as you can make it pretty, it's not going to be the same thing as building your own application. And so this is basically the application that we're going to be building at the end of this series, where we're going to have a vendor selection on the side, and then all the products for that vendor displayed in the middle. And as you click from product to product, your information displays on the right will update, along with the image and the types of information that are relevant, such as who the vendor is, the settings or the rooms that this piece of furniture fits, the type of furniture it is, the materials that are being used, whether or not it's in stock, and then we also have an orders tab, where if you click over to it, you'll be able to see if there are any orders for it, and you can open up an invoice to see what the amount was charged and who it was charging to. But there's a lot of things that are going to go into it, such as quality of life things that we'll cover. Just take once you click onto the vendors, we'll kind of reset views so that it's easy on the users side when they're clicking through things. Like for instance, if we go to orders and then click on another product, we're going to default back to the details view. But there's a lot to do and a lot of videos that are going to go into this part. So let's get started here. We're going to start off by creating something from scratch. So let's go back home to Retool. And the first thing that you're going to want to do is connect your Airtable instance to this. So we're going to go over to the resources tab, and this is where we're going to add in the connection to Airtable. So I created one before, but we're going to create one together just so everybody can see how you do from scratch. I'm going to click on the create new icon, and then from there you're going to select the resource type. Since Retool doesn't have a direct connection with Airtable, we're going to have to use the REST API option up here. When you click on that, you're just going to have to add in a little bit of configuration for that. So we can call this Airtable demo, and then the base URL you can get from the API documentation for Airtable. So let's head back over to Airtable here, and you're going to click on the little help icon on the upper right. And then from there, you're going to click on API documentation. Now, before we click on this, make sure that you go over to your account settings in Airtable and then generate an API key. It's really easy. It's really just one click of a button. When you're in your account settings, you'll see a little area that says API, and then you'll see generate key or generate token or something like that. So some type of button. So click on that, and then we're going to use that in our setup here. So you click on the API documentation, it's going to bring you to the docs. And the cool thing about Airtable is that it takes the base or that table, your account, whatever you're reviewing, and curates the documentation for you specifically. So you can see here, this is Airtable API for product catalog, the thing that we were just using. And then it gives you the ID of that base so that we can use it in our API calls. So going down there, let's go over to vendors, because that's the first API call that we're going to do. And that's going to be list records. So we're going to go into the example over here and copy this first portion of it. And this is essentially, you know, just the base URI or the URL that we're going to be using. And then this is the base ID that we'll be using. Everything after this is very specific to the tables or the views that you're going to be looking at. For us, we just want this because we're creating a very generic resource on Retool for it to connect to. So go ahead and copy that and go back to your configuration and add it in here. And now the way that we authenticate with Airtable is actually using bearer authentication. Go over here, and essentially what you're going to be doing is you're going to pass through your API key with bearer in front of it under the authorization tag within the header. So let's do that together, shall we? I'm going to say in the headers authorization, and then from there copy your API key, which is going to be once again under the account settings for your Airtable account. And then in the value, you're going to say bearer, and then paste in your API key, and then create that resource. So I'm going to go ahead and create an app for it. We're going to call this product catalog tools, and create app. And now let's go ahead and actually test this endpoint here. So the one that we saw before was vendors. So slash vendors, and let's hit preview and see what we had. Looks like we got an authentication error here. Oops, so authentication required. Let's go back over to our resource and see what's wrong here. So let's go back to demo. So this is bear. That is the key. Nothing wrong with that. Maybe I spelled authorization wrong. Possibly. Wait, yeah, that's spelled wrong. There we go. Okay, so let's save that and let's go back here and test it out. Preview. Boom. Okay, so now we're getting data back, and this is the vendor. So we have Dime Design, and then the other guy who is Box and Cask. So we're getting the vendor information. That's exactly what we want. So now let's save this, and we're going to call this vendors so that it's nice and clean when we're building out our application. And let's actually minimize this for now while we build out the UI. So really good practice here is to display things within a container. That way, if you want to move things around, it's really easy for you just to move the entire container instead of having to select multiple options and then dragging those around. So within our container, we're going to use a list view. And that way, what the list view is going to do is it's going to go through all the data that you have within the object that you're passing through to this component, and then it's going to render each, I guess, row of data that's available within it. So over here, what we're going to do is we're going to say curly brackets vendors.data and then .records, because that's kind of how the API request is returning the data to us. It's let me just show you. So in here, everything is within the records variable. We're going to close that out. Height of each row, we can actually say it's dynamic heights because we don't really know how much data we're putting into it. Might as well just let the system handle that for us. And the number of rows we can set to, let's copy this. We're going to do vendors.records.length. That way it's going to show all the vendors that we have at any given time. It's not going to be constrained to just 3, but we only have 2 vendors in this data set, so it doesn't really matter, but this is good practice for you to do. So within here, let's keep it simple. Let's just insert a little text icon, or not a text icon, but just a text field. And you can see that it's already displaying 2 because we only have 2 vendors within our data set. And then let's change this to vendor data, and then the way that you use the list value is that you do an I within square brackets, and then from there we're going to say, oh wait, actually no, it needs to be records. Wait, yeah, data.records. Oops, sorry. So data.records.I, and then let's say name. Right. That not work. Records. Okay, so let's do this first. Okay, I see. So we're going to do i.fields.name. And then boom, there we go. Dime design and box plus cask. So one thing to keep in mind for the Airtable API, Airtable is really finicky at times. And so if you have a case sensitive field, you have to make sure that you're using case sensitivity in it. So if I use the lowercase name, it's not going to work because it's going to be like, what is that? I don't know what that is. So make sure that you capitalize where you have capitalizations. That way you will get the value that you expect. So we can use this for now. I think the dataset also has something like an image. I believe we can actually let's pop this open a little bit so we can see the data. So we have logo, perfect. So we want logo, and then we'll use this URL in order to populate it there. So let's go over to insert. I'm going to search for the image component. Drag that over. And then we can actually make this full width because we can use up the entire space here. And then the kitten is really cute, but that's not what we want. So we're going to go over to vendors.data.records, and then also with the I between the square brackets. And then we're going to do fields.logo, and then it's .url. So let's do that. I think, did I do it wrong? This is within fields, right? Yeah. And there's that data.logo. What did I do wrong there? Fields.name. Fields.logo.url. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this is just also important. There's a little square bracket here, which means that underneath the logo, there's an array. So we just want the first one because there's only one. We don't really care if there's multiple logos. So boom, look at that. Super quick. The logos are displaying now. And then if you want to add a little bit, something a little extra, let's add one more thing here. And that's going to be the number of products that we have under it. So let's take a look at our data here. And that's going to be under fields, under furniture. And then furniture is also an array. So we have to be careful there, but we're going to be getting a record count. So we're going to do fields. Not furniture, and remember it's a capital F for furniture dot length. All right, so that's 10, and then we're going to say number of products. Okay, and then we can put 2 asterisks at the front and back to give that a little bold because they use markdown here. So let's see how this looks. Let's lower this tray here. This looks pretty good. And now we can take this and just kind of squeeze it in. Give ourselves a little bit room on the side there. Oh, that's too small. So let's just give it 2 columns here. That's perfect. We can also probably add in a little bit of spacing. So Retool has something called a spacer. So we can actually add that right here. And then that way our vendors will have some nice decent space that we can go in between those and not have to crowd too much. So pretty simple so far. I think one other thing we're going to do before we close out this video here for this part of the series is we're going to add in a little search box field. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull this down a little bit. Oh, not that. I want the list view. Wait, where'd the container go? There it is. Okay, so we're going to bring this down a little bit so that we have a little bit of room up top where we're going to put in a text input field. And then we're going to stretch this out to full view. And then we can say, no, we don't have to say anything there. It'll be a search field. So actually, I guess we can make it a little wider. And then we can say vendor search or vendor name. Let's do vendor name. So that's going to be a text field. Let's rename this to vendor search so it's easy for us to use it later. Let's open this back up and then run this so that there's data. And so now this is where it gets a little bit tricky with the Airtable API. The Airtable API over here has a concept of filter by formula, and this formula is very unique to Airtable itself. So see over here, this is kind of how it's formatted. There's a lot of documentation around the formulas that you will have to use as you're playing around with the API. The thing that we're going to be using in our application today is called the search formula, and this is just essentially we're going to pass through something that we want to search for, and then which column that we want to search for it in. And the way it works in the API is that you need to also include these curly brackets for that column name. So instead of talking about it, let's just dive in. I'm going to do, so URL parameters is going to be the filter by formula. So go ahead and copy that param just to make sure you don't misspell things. I tend to misspell things all the time. So I'm going to do that, filter by formula. And then within the value, we're going to say search, all caps. And then this is a function, so we're going to add a little parentheses to the beginning and the ends. And then now we're going to say the vendor search value. So double curly brackets, vendor search dot value. And also we're going to do after that the open and close curly brackets, and the column name that we want is called name. So when we run this, I think we're actually going to get an error. Yeah, we're going to get an error. So it's saying that the invalid format. So what we want is actually, because Airtable is very finicky, we need to add in little quotation marks over here for the vendor search area. I'm going to go ahead and hit preview. And now we have a pretty decent set here. So we have dime design. And one more thing, it's also case sensitive. So if I type in dime all lowercase here, and then ran this, it's going to give me nothing. And that's because it's saying, hey, dime lowercase versus I'm only searching for dime uppercase. So what we have to do here instead is we're going to do lower is another formula that Airtable accepts. We're going to do lower, we're going to wrap that, and then we're going to also wrap the name portion. So now we have a search function where we're taking in the value that we put into our text input field, and then we're going to force that into lowercase. And then when we're evaluating the objects in Airtable for the name column, we're also forcing that into a lowercase. When we hit preview, we should see the results. Dime design. Let's go ahead and save and run this. And we can lower this. So now we have dime design. And then if we remove that, both should show up. And if we say cask, that should show up. And if we did all caps for cask, the same thing should show up. Nothing should change. Perfect. So that's basically it. Can actually do a little weirdness with it just to make sure it works, and it does perfectly. So I can also do a little bit of a preview here, since this the preview option is actually only available for Retool when you're paying for it. It's only about $10 an account, so it's pretty worth it to be able to see this type of view only option as you're working through the application and sharing it with other people. But otherwise, you can always use the free option. Everybody will just have access to this, but at least you'll be able to use those tools. But that's it for this part of the series. We're going to have a lot more, obviously, from the initial goal that we have in building out, the vendors list and the products list and the product details, as well as the orders detail. We got a long way to go. But this is the first part of our connecting with Airtable and Retool series. If you have any questions, you're running into trouble, please feel free to leave a comment in the section below. Of course, if you like the video, hit the like button so that other people, other bootstrappers just like you, can find this video and start building low-code applications with Retool on top of their Airtable database, or even the other databases that they might have. We have a lot of videos, that talk about Google Sheets and Postgres database, MySQL database, using Google Cloud Storage, Google Cloud SQL. There's a lot out there, and we like to, build on all the different applications out there that could help bootstrappers like yourself, get ahead. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Like I mentioned, this is, a single part in a lot of different videos that we'll be covering Retool with, especially with Airtable. So hit that subscribe button, hit the bell, make sure you get notified when we release the next video. I'm a guy called Joe. This is Bootstrapping Let's Build, and we're out.